Other people will join as we go along, Alan. Hopefully it won't be too disturbing as we go through. Thank you for those who've already come on to the meeting. We're going to start tonight with Alan Greenwood from SSE, who's going to talk to us about the battery energy storage system that they're proposing goes on Carrington Moss. I have been sent some questions by various people who can't come tonight, which is why I've got Alan's permission to record the meeting. But if you can give Alan the chance to say a few words about the proposal, and then we can throw the meeting open for questions, and then, as I say, if we don't get through all the questions, I'll send them to Alan afterwards. So okay, so and then oh, Sarah, you can't turn your camera on or mic, okay, but at least you can hear. Good. If you've got questions, Sarah, put them in the chat and I'll read them out for you, okay? And if anybody else is struggling to work the equipment, do feel free to put your questions in the chat. But if you're not speaking, if you can keep your microphones and cameras off, that's probably less disruptive for Alan. Okay, so thank you, Alan. Over to you.
Thanks very much. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for letting me speak at your meeting. I know you've got other things to discuss tonight, so I do appreciate your time. My name is Alan Greenwood. I'm the Stakeholder Engagement Manager for SSE Renewables Solar and Battery. SSE is a FTSE 100 listed company. Our renewables division operates all over Europe. We're headquartered in Scotland, but we have operations in all parts of the country, in onshore and offshore wind, in hydro, and in solar and battery. So I'm, as I say, I'm involved in the proposal to create a battery energy storage system at Danes. Battery energy storage systems are not a renewable technology in and of themselves, but they're an enabler for other technologies. The concept is that when solar and wind and other renewable technologies are at their peak performance and producing more energy than the grid can cope with, the excess surplus energy is sent to the battery, to a lithium-ion battery, which stores and captures that energy and then releases it into the grid at a time when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing, making renewables more useful and hopefully making the reliability of our technologies more consistent. What we're proposing for Danes is a BESS, battery energy storage system, with a capacity of up to 600 megawatts. That would be enough to power 836,000 homes, according to government calculations, for up to 2 hours at a time. So that the reason it's a good site is because it's near the grid connection at Danes, so there wouldn't be a lot of dissipation between the energy coming on stream and the energy being stored at our batteries. We've been looking at the Carrington estate for some time, and we believe that it's a suitable site. So tomorrow we're having a public exhibition where we'll be explaining what happens next in the process. We'll be looking at the site, taking a number of measurements and assessment works. This will include looking at the ecology of the area and the habitat, and how we can make improvements and enhancements to the habitat as part of an operating BESS site. I'll try and share my screen here just so that I can show you what the area that we're looking at. If you bear with me for a second, I'll call up Google Maps. Can you see my screen there?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll So the area, this is I'm telling you something you already know, but this is the broader area. The site that we are assessing is this field here, which I'm zooming in on now, which is to the immediate south of the existing industrialised area at Carrington. We've been in consultation with the landowner for some time about identifying a suitable site on their grounds, and this is the site this is the land that we've been given permission to assess. So I'll stop sharing. If that gives everyone an idea, then I'll stop my sharing now.
Yeah, super. Yeah, we could see that fine. It does raise some questions for me, Alan, in that parts of that site have already been identified in other applications as sites where the biodiversity net gain and other compensation for greenbelt release would be delivered. So we just need to make sure that sites aren't being allocated more than once for different things. So that's maybe something that you can pick up with the landowner.
When you say allocated for biodiversity net gain,
yeah,
the site that I've just highlighted is a site that's been used by somebody else at the moment.
No, it's been identified.
Proposal?
It's been identified in a planning application that a particular planning application has come through that will completely fell a woodland SBI. So you can imagine that the level of and it might be a planning proposal, Daniel, rather than a planning application at this stage, although I think there is an application number. I don't know whether it's come through to planning committee yet. But this particular site, as you can imagine, because they're going to completely fell a woodland SBI and turn it into a 22-metre high warehouse, the compensation levels are particularly high, and what they were proposing was that they would extend the southern part of the Shellpool Reserve to encompass some of that area that you were just showing us there for the compensation. So one of the concerns that we have is that sites are being identified for compensation and then they're being reused for more development, so yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
so that's something
concern.
to pick up with that's something to pick up with the landowner, obviously, but we would be it would give us some challenges, basically. Yeah. And Daniel's put in the chat the status of that planning application, so
yeah, I'd need to look into that, but I can understand why that would concern you.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry, I interrupted your flow a little bit there.
No, not at all. The only other things to say is that over the next few weeks and months, we'll be carrying out assessments on the land. This will involve various types of habitat assessments into the ecology of the area, and the findings of that will be used to inform any planning application that we make to Trafford Council. So that work is ongoing. Once we're in a position to share that, I'd be happy to come back and talk to you more about the findings of those results and what it means for the site.
We'd certainly be interested in walking through some of those assessments, particularly the ecology. Obviously, Jeff, who's on the call, Jeff Densham, is part of a group called Trafford Wildlife. They're experts in ecology and they maintain a number of sites on Carrington Moss. and a number of others people on the call are also interested in that, in the ecological and biodiversity issues. But the other issue, I guess, from my perspective, is whether you find peat in that location, how much peat, and what you're going to do if you do find peat. So I think because we would expect you to find peat there. The site is right in the middle of the peat moss, so I would expect you to find peat that would be considered deep peat, and Natural England consider the deep peat at Carrington Moss to be restorable. So they consider it to be an irreplaceable habitat, and they consider it to be restorable. So that would be something else that that interests us too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's we can get. I'm more than happy to get back to you once we've got information on the peatland ecology of the area. It's something we have a lot of experience in. Obviously, we operate across northern Scotland on other technologies where retaining and restoring peatlands is seen as a priority as well. So
they've done a lot of work in Scotland on peat restoration. Put the English to shame. They do. So yeah.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I think we've got more peat. There's certainly more peat to play with in some parts of Scotland. But yeah.
Yeah, well, the peat, just so you're aware, the peat in Greater Manchester is considered to be unique because of the landscape here, and when it was formed and how it was formed, and what have you. So there are some specific elements that will be of issue. I'm assuming that if you find peat, or maybe whether you do or you don't, are you engaged with Natural England to as part of your application?
Yeah, well, Natural England will be a statutory consultee. So once we've got more information on our habitat surveys, we'll share them with Natural England for comment and guidance if required. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do you mind if I throw the floor open in case other people have questions at this stage, Alan?
No, not at all.
Yeah. So can I just ask, does anybody have any questions for Alan? As we, so I did get some questions from others who were unable to make it tonight. I think Paul's typing into the chat, but I'll come back to you, Paul, in a second. So can I just give you, raise a couple of issues with you that have been asked from other people. One of the big issues that people are concerned about is the noise levels. We understand containers, or whatever the batteries will be in, will have cooling fans that can be quite noisy. So is there anything that you can share with us on that side of thing? Yeah.
Yeah, well, there will be noise surveys going on at the moment. We have noise monitors at various sites around Carrington, around the Carrington area, so that we can record the resting levels as they are just now, and use that as a baseline for any assessments that we carry out. You're right, there is an emission of noise from the cooling agents, the same way that there's a noise from large fridges. It's a very similar concept. Most of that noise is contained within the containers, and we would expect the rest of the noise to be absorbed by natural screening, which we would put around the property. But there will be there'll be an opportunity to look at the noise assessments once that work is finished, and prior to any planning submission. But it is a known issue, and it's something that we have to mitigate as best we can.
Okay, because that may, Paul W, and I'll come to you, Paul Beckman, in a second, but that may be an issue because Paul has asked whether there's anything to prevent this type of development being placed on brownfield sites near residential properties. So rather than being on the green belt and in the area that we're expecting to be used for compensation and biodiversity net gain, or why wouldn't we put it on the industrial site itself? Because there is a lot of space still there.
But the answer to that is that the site that we've got is the site that we've been able to procure as an area for search. There are other sites nearby that we weren't able to procure, so that's why we're looking at the site that we have.
Right. So this is the site that Highmore have given you from their land, is that right? Wayne Estates, they're known as now. Yeah. Okay. So Paul Beckman, you had a question.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Alan. Can you give some indication as to how high the structures will be on the site, and have Trafford required you to do a landscape and visual impact assessment? Because obviously, even something as much as low as 2 or 3 meters could be seen for miles across the moss.
Yes, there will be a landscape and visual impact assessment as part of the work that we're on, that's ongoing. The containers, the height of the containers depends on the batteries that the chosen contractor would use. But if you imagine a shipping container, the dimensions of a shipping container, it would be similar to that. So between 2 and 3 meters high usually. We would seek to use natural screening to mitigate against any visual impacts, and that would be by installing plantings around the perimeter, which would be higher than the height of the containers. There may be 1 or 2 areas where there's bits of connecting cables and connecting structures which are higher than that, but most of the site would be lower than the height of the screening that we would put in place.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. I mean, there is a problem with that, obviously, that Forestry Commission and various other organisations suggest you shouldn't plant trees on or near peat because it assists in drying it out. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, I think.
Yeah, maybe hedgerows, and we might be able to get something like that in place, but I think it's certainly something to be considered, Alan.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'd be happy to work with you on that. If there's an opportunity, we're very keen to try and make sure that any planting that's done is indigenous to the area, and that we use native species wherever possible. But we'd be happy to consult with you on that if there's a preferred type of screening that could be used. I think we would want to talk to you and see what we could do to make that happen.
Yeah.
Super.
Thanks for that.
Okay, I think Daniel, you had a question as well, didn't you?
Yeah. Thanks, Marge. I must also declare that I'm a local councillor for Altrincham. So I just thought I'd let you know that. But I've got 2 questions. I think we have a live planning application in Gulf Road at the moment in sale for the same type of storage. Am I right in thinking that you have to return the land to as it was after 30 years? So the storage will be removed eventually. And the second question, if you want 2 parts, or do you want to answer that one first? The second question is, there is a government strategy for this kind of storage. It tells us how much we need, and it also, the strategy tells us what type of storage it should be, or the best kind of technical quality that's needed. But there is no kind of government plan for where this should go across the country. So at the moment, applicants are open to kind of come up with plans, put an application in, and it's very difficult for councils to turn those down, especially when they're on greenbelt. I just wondered if you had any view on whether the government should do more to kind of allocate land, working with councils across the country to kind of come up with a plan for where this should go and then offer it out to, companies like yourselves.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, to go back to the first question, technically our application, our BESS, the battery would be seen as a temporary structure, even though the lifespan might be 30 or 40 years. And you're right to say that at the end of that, there would be a bond in place to ensure that there's reinstatement, so that it's returned to the use to the land use that it was before. In practice, that what we would hope that it wouldn't be a case of returning it to what was there before. There is a statutory requirement to include a certain percentage, at least 10% of biodiversity net gain. So at the future point when the battery had finished its lifespan, we would hope it wouldn't be a case of returning it to the original situation. It would actually be an improved landscape and an improved habitat. On your second point, I think it's difficult for us to comment, because that's really difficult for us to comment on government policy. I think we're expecting to see more guidance on how BESS should be developed once the government energy strategy is moved forward a little bit. That'll be incorporated probably with the GB Energy venture that the new administration are hoping to bring in. The reason that Danes and other developers nearby are interested in this area is because the grid connection is very good. National Grid will indicate to us areas of preferred search for projects such as this. So I would expect any government guidance to be informed by National Grid and what they were saying about the suitability of various sites. Danes is on an unusual site because it is on the outskirts of an industrial estate. It's very close to the city centre. So from an energy delivery point of view, it has it's got a lot of attractive qualities to us. And I wouldn't want to speak to other developers, but I would expect that other developers find the area similarly to their advantage to develop in. So I wouldn't expect, I think if there was government guidance, I wouldn't think it would change very much, because we are being informed by National Grid, and what they're telling us is a good site.
So Alan, that just prompts me to ask a question that somebody raised with me, which is, will local users get cheap energy as a consequence of this, or discounted energy or anything like that? No.
We're asked that question a lot, and it's something I think we would like to try and do, but in terms of actually what that looks like in the real world, is very difficult to do. There have been pilot schemes in other parts of the countries where people near energy production sources have had there have been schemes in place, and it's actually in practice it's very difficult to make it work. What we would look at doing is making sure that the various strands of community investment and community benefit that we would put in place to support a scheme like this would be used to benefit individuals and communities in other ways. We're one of the biggest investors in communities in the country in terms of energy companies. There would be a community investment package which would be part of any operating Danes site. And there would be money from that community investment package to invest in sustainability and ecological enhancement over the lifespan of the battery project. But there wouldn't be an opportunity to reduce people's individual bills, I'm afraid, no.
Okay. Daniel, sorry to interrupt your question. Did you have any other points to raise?
Yeah, thanks for answering those questions. I take it the National Grid are telling us we need so much BESS by a certain point to meet net zero. So that's the whole point of why we're doing this, I take it.
Yeah, BESS, as I said at this earlier on, I think BESS is seen as kind of helping to complete the circle. One of the inherent issues with renewable energy is that if it's not windy, if it's not sunny, then turbines don't turn and solar panels don't gather any aren't successful. So battery is seen as helping to make renewables more usable. It's still an emerging technology in terms of where we are now compared to where we were even 5 years ago. It's advanced a lot. So I would think any predictions about capacity that are made now would probably be obsolete in about 5 or 10 years' time, because the technologies that we're using are advancing all the time.
Can I just ask one more question for my
Could I
understanding?
just, Daniel, could I just interrupt 1 second with another, given that it's just linked to that. So are the batteries recyclable, Alan?
Not as a unit. There are components of the batteries that are recyclable, and we seek to recycle as much of them as we can. But there are parts of the batteries which are not at the moment. Okay.
Sorry, Daniel. Back to you.
Yeah, just going to ask a very quick question. But are you taking energy off the grid, or is the energy that you're receiving is coming from renewable sources? Or...
It's energy that the grid doesn't have capacity for. So if Dogger Bank offshore wind farm is working at capacity, then that would be too much energy for the grid to take. So rather than have to turn down the amount of energy that's coming on shore, it would be diverted to the battery and then plugged into the grid at a later point.
Thank you. And just want to introduce, while we're just in a break or in between questions, Andrew Dempster has joined the call, who is your colleague, I think.
Yes.
Alan, welcome, Andrew. I know you're travelling at the moment and it may be difficult for you to answer, but I hope you can hear us at least, and we can pick up after the meeting. A number of other people have joined the call, and since we started. So if you've got any questions at all about the battery energy storage system, please do raise your hand. And I noticed that Paul W, as opposed to Paul B. I think Paul W, you did raise your hand there. Did you have another question?
Yeah, just a question, Alan. I've seen some of these systems where energy is stored by compressing gas or freezing gas and then releasing it at a later date, which is a different system totally to yours. How do the two compare, and is yours going to be an outdated technology at some stage, or vice versa? Is the freezing gas going to be an outdated technology?
I'm afraid I can't answer that with anything other than a layman's answer. Can I speak to someone on our development team and get back to you on that, please, Paul?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to give you a half informed answer.
Yeah.
So if it's okay, I'll email. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. You know the system I'm talking about.
Is it hydrogen cell storage that you're referring to?
No, it's something similar to where you refrigerate liquid gas, and then at a later stage, by de-refrigerating it, you then gain the energy back. It's more akin to a chemical plant than the sort of batteries you're using. But okay.
And I think Sarah had a similar question about the hydrogen batteries. Sarah, did you want to come in now? I'm not sure if you could. Can you speak, or do you want to just use the chat? I'm not sure if Sarah can come off mute, but Sarah has put a similar question in the chat, which is about the hydrogen batteries, and asking whether your company is investigating the use of hydrogen as opposed to lithium. And that actually links to another question that I've had from somebody that couldn't join, asking whether the development is genuinely green. So I think that all these questions are sort of linked together. Paul's question, Sarah's question, and the question from from outside the meeting. So perhaps you could come back to us on that, Alan. That would be helpful. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. We are looking at green hydrogen. We have been piloting a project in Scotland with regard to that. But it's, I think with all these technologies, I would say there has to be a mix. We probably wouldn't want to be reliant on lithium-ion storage any more than we would want to be reliant on any other kind of storage. We're also investing heavily in things like hydro storage. We're looking at developing a long-duration hydro storage scheme at Corrie Glass in the Scottish Highlands, which would operate like a big battery. I think storage is one of the biggest challenges that faces renewables. So there's got to be a number of potential solutions to it. I don't think lithium-ion is the one and only thing we would be looking at.
No, super. Well, we'd obviously be interested in a bit more about that. And you might be aware that Trafford does have a green hydrogen plant in Carrington. So it would be far better if we were using that green hydrogen locally than putting 700 HGVs on the road every single day. So, you know, we'd welcome something more local like that. Jeff, you had your hand up. And then Daniel, yeah.
A couple of questions, really. One is, how many churns of the battery would there be during the 30-year lifetime? Do the batteries last for 30 years, or do they have to be changed like 3 times, so it's 10 years per battery set?
It would depend on the technology that the contractor uses, but yeah, we would expect the lifespan to be between 10 and 15 years.
Okay. Have you got any sort of pictures that you can show us of another installed site so we can have some idea of what one would look like?
Yeah, I do. We've got a site at Salisbury which opened earlier this year, and I can send over some pictures from there, if that would be helpful.
Well, I think it'd be good to see. Yeah. And my last question, which I just managed to forget. Any technology, when it's put in, the instance it's sort of been developed, it becomes obsolete. That's the way technology moves forward, of course, all the time. I think we just accept that's the way it is. And you can put something in 5 years later, you say, well, if I knew what I knew now, I wouldn't have put that in then. But that's the way technology always changes. So there may be improving technologies, but at this moment in time, whatever the one is that you're proposing is the best available. Just the point I wanted to make. It's not a question, really. It's just how it is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, and just so you know, Paul's put into the chat, it's CES that he was talking about, cryogenic energy storage, which again, I think there might be some cryogenic energy storage in Carrington or proposed for Carrington at the power station. So it would be good to see some of these things joined up a little bit because obviously we have Trafford green hydrogen, which is going to be put onto HGV and sent onto the roads. And then we have Trafford, no, not Trafford blue hydrogen. We have HyNet's blue hydrogen, which is being shipped by pipeline all the way from the Wirral and is going to end up in Carrington. And it just seems like there's very little joined up thinking in terms of, and I think Paul was mentioning earlier about the strategic and Daniel about the strategic landscape for battery storage, because we seem to be having lots of little bits dropped into Carrington, none of which are joining up, and it's how we get to that joined up picture that would be of interest. Daniel, just before I come to you, there's a question in the chat from Brenda asking how safe the batteries are to local people and wildlife. And that is something that was asked of me from other people who are not on the call as well.
Yeah, well, in terms of safety, the main issue that we have to monitor is the temperature, the operating temperature of the battery, to make sure it doesn't overheat. We have a constant monitoring system to make sure that the batteries are kept at a temperature which is sustainable. If there is a risk of overheating, the battery is shut down and taken offline, taken out of use, and either repaired or removed. It is a known issue. I think with earlier technologies, with earlier versions of the battery technology, there were issues with batteries overheating. It's a known issue now, and it's something that's at the forefront of any development that we do, is making sure that there's a safety process in place to avoid any issues with that. I mean, more generally, I think, yeah, if you Google batteries and flammability, then you can find things online which should,
yeah.
which I think
there's
would
a
scare
lot
anyone.
there's a lot of scary stories, but of course, one of the big issues for us is that because it's likely to be sited on peat, if it does catch fire, the peat will catch fire across the moss. Basically, it'll whip across the moss like there's no tomorrow. Yeah.
And I think that's why we would be keen to emphasise the fact that fire events of that kind, with the kind of technology we would be talking about using, are vanishingly rare. In the same way that if someone puts in a planning application for a petrol station, you could make a very strong
training, thousands of people with no training every day to be using a highly flammable substance, but in practice we're aware of the risks, mitigate the risks, and we make sure that that doesn't happen. I would say battery with a developer like us, where we operate across lots of complex technologies, we would see ensuring the safety of the batteries and containing the battery units as a priority.
Super. Okay, Daniel, and then Paul B, I think. So Daniel, did you want to come in now?
Yeah, I put my hand down because my question was going to be about fire safety and access to make sure there's access for the fire services if a fire were to break out.
Oh,
but also,
there'll be a brand new relief road running right up to it, Daniel.
Yeah, of course, but there'll also be thousands of more homes in the area
Yeah,
and storage units, as we've mentioned. So, but obviously it's a concern that you're aware of.
It is, and I think the other big issue that's sort of linked to that is that there are a number of hazardous businesses in Carrington, which you may or may not be aware, a number of coma zones. We obviously have Basel, which is the fuel. We have the power station. We have other air products, all of which are hazardous, and there will be a much greater impact in the future should we need to evacuate people, because there'll be 5,000 more homes, 350,000 more meters square of warehousing, so more employees. The figures on employees range from 6,000 to a lot more than that, but I'm a bit skeptical of the figures anyway. But whatever the numbers are, because the figures are greater, it will add to the challenges of evacuating people safely, with or without a new road, to be honest. Paul B, and then Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Marge. My question is almost exactly what you've just said. I was just going to ask Alan if there's is there a hazard zone around the battery storage?
In terms of a ring-fenced area,
a coma zone, a coma zone.
Yeah.
Not for our project. There is a coma zone for the substation, the nearby substation, but no, not for our project. No.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks. Interesting. Right. Okay. Jeff.
Yeah, it's just a brief point, really. Presumably, Alan's aware that the nearest fire station at Sale is being becoming not fully manned. So therefore at night, I believe it will not be available. So if there is an incident, the fire service response to an incident there will be longer than you might think with a local fire brigade. Have you taken that into account?
At the moment, it's not that's not been investigated yet, but that's really useful to know, Jeff. Thank you. Again, I would just reiterate the point that the risk of fire from the technology that we'd be using is vanishingly rare. It's something that we would manage and mitigate in a way that would make sure that there wouldn't be an incident. That would be our first point of defence. That would be our first point of action. But yeah, we will liaise with the local fire authority and make sure they're happy with what we're proposing.
I think the other thing that comes into this, as we're reaching a relatively unstable world, it might not be just fire, it might be terrorist attack or anything like that. Because we have a problem with a sort of security situation, which is not going to get any better by the sounds of it, what extra precautions will you put in place to protect the site?
Well, the site will be sealed. There won't be. It'll be behind locked fences and gates, and it'll be monitored. There'll be 24-hour CCTV monitoring.
But if there's an incident there, how quickly is it your own people that have to respond to any break-in or anything like that, or do you get some local police to do that?
It would depend on the nature of the incident, but yeah. If it was something that was a police matter, we would contact the police immediately. Yeah.
The problem is you don't know when an incident is detected. You don't really know whether it's a terrorist attack or somebody just trying to break in or somebody trying to nick some batteries.
Kids, yeah.
Kids are a big problem around here. Well, not a big problem, a big solution. Yeah. But there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of them roaring around Carrington Moss.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the other issue to take into consideration is that if there is an incident at one of the other sites, let's say Shell Basel or Air Products, there could be quite a significant ricochet effect in the area because of the number of hazardous businesses that there are. So it may not be something that happens on your site, but it could be a ricochet from something that happens on another site. So your containers, I mean, are they? I think you mentioned they're sealed, but are they? Are they bulletproof? What sort of level of security are they?
Can I get back to you on that in writing? I mean, they are secure, but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to. I would just want to make sure I was saying exactly the right thing about that. They are secured in a way that makes it as difficult as possible for someone to access them. But I wouldn't want to say something that turned out to be wrong. So if it's okay, I'll
we're very happy to have. I mean, you can tell that we're really interested in this, Alan, and we're not looking for problems. We're looking at ways in which we can make sure that what is developed is suitable for the site. Given that it's pretty remote and isolated, it's not going to be surrounded by houses or people watching what's going on or what have you. It's likely to be surrounded by, well, there'll be a road and warehousing, and there might not be anybody nearby at various times. So and your compound's going to be secure, so there'll be no access for humans or domestic pets or horses. But what about wildlife access to food and water courses? Because, I'm not quite sure in my head how big this compound is going to be. But we do have an awful lot of wildlife on Carrington Moss, red-listed birds, endangered species, water vole, bats, various other creatures, and they need access to their water sources. So whilst the site is really secure for humans and domestic animals, if you like, we would want to see that it wasn't restricting wildlife from accessing their territory for food and water.
No, and that's the kind of thing that the survey work that we're doing at the moment will help will inform. I think more generally, in terms of particularly airborne wildlife, the absence of human involvement is actually a positive thing.
Beneficial. Yeah, no, we agree.
So
yeah.
there's opportunity there, and again, it's something we'd be keen to consult with on to use part of the site, part of the biodiversity net gain area of the site as a way of encouraging and promoting indigenous species in an environment where they're not going to come into interface with humans.
Yeah, super. I mean, with that all in mind, how floodlit will the site be? You know, will it be lit up overnight? You know, like a Blackpool illuminations. You know, or will it be dark at night?
There'll be security lighting, but a lot of that will be motion triggered, and some of it will be permanent. But again, we would carry out assessments on that to make sure that there was no light pollution wherever possible. Yeah,
because we'd like to see the night sky dark, really, because that's what it's used to on Carrington Moss. So yeah, okay. Anybody got any other questions before I go back to the list that I've got of others? Anybody else with a hand up? No? Okay. I did have a question about how viable the technology is. Is it economically and technically sound? And I'm assuming that it will be, otherwise you wouldn't be repeating what you're doing in various places, because I know you've got this in other sites up and down the country, haven't you?
Yeah. Yes, is the answer. It's battery is produced on a merchant basis, which means that there's no subsidy or no direct subsidy. It's purely there to facilitate a greater flow of renewable energy onto the grid. I should have put my teeth in properly. So it's not. It is viable, yes, and it's not just viable in its own right. It makes things like offshore wind farms more viable. So it's not, battery isn't just a solution in itself, it's actually an enabler for other technologies which we need.
Super, okay. And then just going back to the ecology and the biodiversity, is there any risk to groundwater as a consequence of the facility?
Well, again, it's something that we have to look into. I don't have an answer for you on that just now. We would need to talk about that once the survey and assessment work has been completed. Right. But the view would be there doesn't need to be a risk if it's done in the right way and managed properly. But it would be wrong to talk too much about what that might look like without knowing the results of the surveys that we're doing. Right,
okay. And along a similar vein, will there be any gases emitted from the site, you know, like toxic or otherwise, I suppose, you know, so anything you can tell us about gases?
In terms of emissions from the site, no, there'd be nothing like that.
No. Okay, so that's good. And yes, Andrew's just put in about the land is currently intensely farmed, which we welcome actually because of food security. And we think there is a big issue about releasing best and most versatile agricultural land, which this is. It's grade 2 agricultural land for other purposes. And I suppose that comes back to Paul W.'s question earlier on about perhaps it should be sited somewhere more appropriate on brownfield land in, you know, and so that's something that we will feed back because, you know, you have issues about not just about food security, But in Carrington, our farmland is sustaining populations of ground nesting birds such as the skylark, and obviously, and you can see them when you go out for walks on the moss. In fact, I'm taking a school onto the moss next Wednesday, and I'm taking them to see the solar farm and also to see some of the farmland. And whilst we welcome renewable technologies and this sort of initiative, we don't want to see farmland taken out of productivity when we need that future food security and replaced with things that could really be put somewhere else more sustainably. So yeah, so I mean, there's pros and cons, isn't there, about farmland? So okay, any other questions from anyone while we so Alan, I have a list here of things that you've agreed to provide us with. So you're going to send us some pictures and graphics and the exhibition materials that you're going to be showing tomorrow at the Fuse. And you've got a session at Fuse. It's a drop-in session between, is it 2 and 6:30 or something like that?
2:30 to 6:30.
2:30 to 6:30 at the Fuse in Partington tomorrow, if anybody's available. So, and then you're going to also send us some materials about how green the solution is, what variations there might be. And I know that Andrew's been putting some information in the chat, but maybe we could get that all together. And Andrew, you did mention SSE thermal as well in the chat, so maybe we can have a bit of information about that, about the security of the containers and the groundwater and the assessments that you're going to be carrying out. So yeah, so we'd be very interested in all of those things.
If you don't mind, Marge, could you do me a small favour and just
oh, I will.
send me the list by email, and I'll.
I will,
because I've not been able to. I've not been able to take notes while I'm in the car here. So
no, that's fine. I will be doing some notes.
At that stage in my life where I can't trust
it. No, don't worry. I'll do some notes, and I'll also share with you the link to the meeting as well, so you can watch it back if you want to. Thank you so much, both Andrew and Alan. Really appreciate you taking the time to come on tonight. Not everybody will be able to get to Partington tomorrow, but if you are able, then please do pop along and meet with Alan and Andrew in person. Any final points, Alan or Andrew?
No, just to say, very much appreciate the time and the questions that you asked. There's a lot to get through there. I think this is really just the start of a consultation, so it would be useful for us to keep in touch, and we're more than happy to share our findings as we go ahead of if there is any planning submission. We would want to make sure that we'd spoken to you before we did anything on that front as well. So
that's super. Thank you very much. For those who are staying on the call, we're going to do our 200 Club draw. We're going to re-elect the committee because this is our AGM, which will be a 1-minute thing. And then any other business. So Alan and Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Feel free to stay if you want to stay for our 200 Club draw. It's only £22 for a year's subscription, and you get 3 chances every month of winning a cash prize. We use the 200 Club draw money to fund our legal and expert advice that we need to pay for from time to time. So, yeah.
But very kind of you, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to go. But
yeah,
no,
that's fine. Lovely to meet you. Well, to see you on the screen. meet you virtually. Thank you as well, Andrew. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Barbara now, who's going to do the 200 club draw. Yes, it is a bargain. It is a bargain.
It certainly is. If you win first prize.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. Yeah. So what are our prize monies tonight, Barbara?
Well, we've had some new members joining this month, so we now have 143 people in the draw. So we're creeping ever closer to the magic 200. And the prizes this month are £72 for first, £43 for second, and £14 for third. So
not to be sniffed at. So
indeed, the third prize is actually the same as last month because of how the percentages work. But
no, that's fine.
Or not. So right, so I'm going to the old. They've all been sorted out and wiggled around already today. So first number out for the first prize is number, where's my camera? 88.
Clickety click.
Flip through my list, which I've got printed out, which is because it's easier, which is Maureen Wright.
Super.
I'll just write that down so I don't forget.
Yeah, I've written it down anyway. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Another scribble. I'd like to let you know also that I do audit this every month, so I do know that I've got the right number of balls in the bag, just in case you were wondering. So the second prize is number 40.
How weird is that? 88.44.
Yeah. Anybody want to put a bet on 22 being the third one? Number 44 is Carl Dale.
Oh right, okay. He's on holiday at the moment. He might need the money when he comes back.
Yes. So that's 44 second. Okay. And third is not number 22, I'm sorry to say. It's 107.
Okay. Must be one of our relatively new people.
One of is well, yes and no. Christine Mealaw. Christine.
Oh right, okay. Yeah.
A recent returner, I think, is
right. Is the super. Okay.
Okay, I will notify them.
Thank you very much.
And thank you everybody for supporting us, and also for those of you that are joining up with Easy Fundraising as well, because we're gradually growing the number of people on that, which is really helpful.
And I mean, sometimes you only get 7 pence for a for something that you buy, let's say on Amazon. But when all those 7 pences get added up, you know, it does end up being meaningful. So if you do buy stuff online, please do consider using Easy Fundraising. And do the prize money is, I think, £72 isn't to be sniffed at, is it? For a first prize. So do
that's at least that's more than 3 years worth of subscriptions.
It is, yes. So anyway, please do encourage friends and family to join, because we have coming up in October, and can you believe it's October next week? Because I just don't know where this year has gone. But 23rd of October, we have our court date for the judicial review to tell us whether we've got permission to go forward. Because what has to happen with a judicial review is, first of all, a judge looks at your case and tells you if you've got permission to go forward, and then you go forward. So the permission meeting or court hearing is on the 23rd of October. And if we do get permission, we then need to raise another £70,000 to pay for the legal and financial advice. And not just us, though, that is all of, say, Greater Manchester's Greenbelt. And please do encourage friends and family to sign up to get updates, to get the newsletter, so that they are on board and hearing everything, and sharing information with their friends and families, because the wider we can get the message out, the better it will be. Because I do still see some misinformation being put about from various sources by people who maybe don't know any better. But basically, you know, we're in a situation where today even there has just been a report issued on the A30 upgrade, and it was a £330 million project down in Cornwall. And basically what the residents have said is that the traffic has increased significantly, which is what we keep saying about the Carrington Relief Road, because of induced traffic coming into the area. And we are expecting that the Carrington Relief Road consultation will start in October. You know, they have said themselves, the people who are the authors of various reports have said themselves that traffic will be induced into the area as a consequence of upgrading this road, putting this new road in. And I just don't think it's going to help anybody at all. It is going to add to air, noise, light, vibration and water pollution. And there is more and more evidence coming forward all the time about the impact on health, particularly as a consequence of air pollution. So, you know, we will be talking to people about that, because we'll be wanting people who to monitor their health conditions at the moment, and then monitor them after the Carrington Relief Road goes in, if we don't manage to stop it, because with the view to instigating a claim through the Human Rights Act. And Article 2 of the Human Rights Act says that public bodies should not make decisions that affect your life expectancy. And there's already evidence and research that suggests that air pollution is reducing life expectancy by more than 2 years. So we will be looking at taking something forward on that, which is why it's so important that we do keep fundraising, because anything that we do, if we don't manage to stop these plans, is going to cost money for legal advice. So yeah, so that's Carrington Relief Road. The oh, and the other thing is the new Carrington Master Plan, which is moving forward. Trafford have held a number of workshops, but there hasn't been a workshop yet about ecological and biodiversity implications. And as we're seeing more and more planning applications coming through now, because I understand that Redrow are getting ready to submit a planning application for Warburton, we need to see the ecological infrastructure that is being planned alongside the rest of the infrastructure, and that is a key gap at the moment in the in Trafford's documentation about the new Carrington Master Plan. So we'll be pushing for that as soon as possible, because as things come forward, we need to be able to see the whole picture, and not have the ecology and biodiversity as an afterthought. And then just one other thing that I need to do tonight is to ask you all to raise your hands if you agree that our committee can be re-elected for another year. And if anybody has any concerns or anything about that, then let's talk about them now. So, but if anybody that doesn't know, in terms of the committee, I'm the chair, Barbara's the treasurer, Anna, who couldn't attend tonight, is the secretary, Brenda is on the committee, Valerie's on the committee, Julie Hay, who was on the call earlier but had to leave, is on the committee, as is Lorraine Eaglin, who couldn't get on the call tonight. She had another meeting as well. So is anybody unhappy about putting the committee back on? Jeff, you haven't got your hand up. Is it because you're no longer on the call? Penny, are you okay with us? Yes, thank you. Okay, I shall formally record that we were voted back in. So thank you, Jane. Thank you for coming along. And thank you to everybody for continuing to support us. It's been a long, hard slog, actually, and continues to be a long, hard slog, but it's worth fighting for, isn't it? So, you know, the plan is bonkers, you know, so yes. So anyway, we shall record that we are voted back in. And anybody got any other business that they want to raise at this stage? No? Well, thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate you coming along. As I say, next week, I'm going to be taking a school onto the Moss next Wednesday in the morning, but in the afternoon at 2 o'clock, I'm going to be taking somebody from the NHS and Judy Collins from Altrincham and Bowden Civic Society for a little walk on the Moss. So if anybody would like to come, you're very welcome. Just let me know, get in touch, let me know. And I will see you all soon. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
You.
I should have stopped the recording, shouldn't I?
Did you say it?
No.
Bye.